I am so excited. This morning, I have with me my friend Cicely, and she's doing absolutely amazing things. She is a blogger, a writer, an entrepreneur, a creative. The list could literally go on and on. But one of the reasons I'm so excited to have her with us is um, because she has her hands in so many different things, creativity has looked very differently on her. And I want her to tell us a little bit about that because it gives us just a broader scope of what art ministry can look like. It's not just here's a canvas and we're just going to be painting today. So I'm really excited to pick her brain to let you guys hear her story. So Cicely, will you tell us just who you are, a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. This is so awesome, and I love what you're doing. And so it's an honor to be here. I am Cicely Renee, Cicely, born and raised in Minneapolis, but I live here in Louisville, Texas, where I am just being my most like creative self. Let's see, I am a lover of art and literature. I love creativity and I love like connecting with people. I'm a social introvert, if you will. So I definitely enjoy communicating with people, but I definitely enjoy my solace, my solitude as well.
I love social. I super get what you were saying about the social introvert. So it sounds like though too, creativity has been kind of like a safe space for you. That's where you get to go in your we don't want to call it a hole because that sounds like we're hermits. We're not hermits. It's just a safe space.
It
Uh,
is.
so for you, that has looked like writing a lot of times. I know that you're also a visual artist, but when did you start writing and what types of things have you been writing?
Yeah, so I have been writing like my whole entire life. But once I hit like, so I was married for about 2.5 years, and writing became kind of like my therapy, right? So, like, I didn't have the best marriage at all. And then once we were divorced, I wanted to talk to women about thriving after divorce. And so I was writing, different blogs to help women be encouraged, of course, your dreams and what you planned on with this particular relationship didn't go as planned, but there's still, God has some more for you. God has something bigger in store for you. And so I was writing a little bit about thriving after divorce, but then I was like, I don't want that to be my whole story. And so it turned into something else where I wanted to focus on, artists, authors, entrepreneurs, and I just wanted to share people's voices. And so writing has become like, you know, I don't know. I just love sharing people's voices. And I feel like a lot of people hold back. They have been told not to say things, and their stories are so encouraging for other people. And I'm just like, what you go through is not just for you. And so that was like my whole belief. I'm just like, okay, I went through this divorce and now people like I'm writing about my divorce and people are reaching out, really, inspired and encouraged. And so that's when like my writing started. And then when I started doing artwork is when I became a teacher. Okay. And so we taught like my first year of teaching was a lot. And so when that summer came, the first 2 weeks, I just slept on the sofa. Like I couldn't get up. I would go to the bathroom, eat a little bit, and sleep for 2 weeks. And I was like, what is going on? And then after that, like I started creating because I'm like, I have this time. And I'm like, okay. So I think it started off with like, you know, uh, t-shirts. And then it became every summer I added a new hobby. And I was just like, oh, and it became my therapy. And so I would paint and then, like it was healing for me. And it was quiet time. And I live alone. So it's like I was able to like be, intimate with God and me, myself, because, as a teacher, you have to talk to a bazillion people all day. And that can be a lot. Um,
I want to go back for a second because you started talking about people's stories. And I think Gosh, I think that's so right on and so important. Why do you feel like it's so powerful to empower other people? I love that you started telling your story. And in you telling your story, it sounded like God was really showing you that other people need to share their stories too. So, why do you feel like it's so important to empower people to tell their stories?
Yes. So, a couple years ago, I started doing like micro memoirs and stuff like that, and helping people write creative memoirs and just like getting their voices out. And specifically, I was like working with the African American community because of the history of like our history being wiped out. Um, for me personally, I don't know much about anything after my grandfather. And so I'm just like, what happened to these stories? And I'm like, I don't know anything. And I felt so, I felt bad. Like, I felt as if someone took something from me. I'm like, why don't I have this? And I was like, okay, we need to get your voices out. We need to figure out ways to, you know, uh, pass this down to future generations so that they know what you guys been through, share recipes, stories, because it teaches us, but it also like empowers us to be like, man, we come from a long line of amazing people. And so that was one of the reasons why I opened the bookstore. So I did a lot of self-published art of authors. So that was like 80% of my store was for self-published.
Tell us a minute about the bookstore, because I know there's a whole story to that, but I love what you're saying and I love the heart behind it. So give us a little snapshot of what that season was for you.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. So like I love writing. So writing and journaling and sharing your story is like my number one. Okay. And so I went to this place called AWP, which is Authors Association for Writers and Programs or something like that. And we went, there was a whole bunch of publications, and it was definitely very focused, like on one particular genre or, nationality, ethnicity. And so I was just like, we need more diverse voices in here. So I started a zine. And so it was for BIPOC and women to share their stories. And then I was like, I want to keep going on that, because I'm like, it's so being published, finding a publisher is hard, right? And it's like you have to know somebody to get in there. And so, but I'm just like, our voices still matter. And I was like, self-publish is where it's at. Like, yeah, we got to do a lot more work, but that means that you're really true to this, right? And so then the zine turned into a bookstore. And I was like, man, we need to get BIPOC voices on these shelves. And then there are artists and creatives. So I like 80% of the store was like books, and then the other 20% was like makers. And so we had candle makers, we had jewelry makers, artists. And so like I just wanted people to have an opportunity to be seen and heard, not censored. So like that's another issue with publishing with like big companies. They're like, well, you can't write this, right? And so if it's their truth or whatever they experience, it's like, why should I censor it? Why should I water it down?
To get on a shelf.
Yeah, so get on a shelf. And
Okay.
so like one of the like testimonies from that, like there's this one lady named Krista. She's phenomenal, and she's been phenomenal. And so I was her first bookstore for her to get her book on a shelf, right? And she was like my number one bestseller. And so now she's like in about 4 different stores, and she's just like blowing up. And she's like always in my ear, you need to go to this store, you need to go here, put your book on the shelf, do this. And I'm just like, okay. So it's like first I was empowering her, and now she's empowering me. And so I just love that. And so one of the things about the bookstore is like we were building community. And so there were a lot of relationships that were built because of the people that were in the bookstore. Like it's awesome.
It is awesome. It's really inspiring. I think it's beautiful. I love that it all began with you telling your story and knowing that your voice needed to be heard, but then also recognizing there are so many other voices that need to be heard that aren't being represented. And whether that is, yeah, creatively or on the shelves, and like you said, in writing. And it's so true. And that's why I love how many different ways that God has used that in you. Like it just keeps going because he's giving you an entrepreneurial heart. And you're like, okay, we're going to do that now. And now we're going to do that. And so I love that it's not stopping. He just keeps giving you ideas. So tell me a little bit about what that looks like in this season. I know that you are doing something called Bibles and Blooms, and you guys are doing some Bible journaling. Is that right? And I think it's under like a bigger thing called Creative Wellness Project. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Okay. Tell us about that and tell us what that looks like in this season, because you just continue to keep empowering people to one, I know, to dive into the word, but also to keep writing and sharing their stories and figuring out how to get what's inside outside. So what does that look like?
Yes. So remember, so like during my teaching years, art became my therapy. And so I was like, this needs to be for other people. Like sometimes people can't afford real therapists, even though I don't say it's therapy, I say it's therapeutic art activities. And so I was doing that. I was doing some workshops and then COVID happened. And then once I had the bookstore, I did a few sessions there and I just absolutely loved it because, like people would come in and they'll do one little activity and all of a sudden just start bawling. And I'm just like, it would just be like like a collage or something. And that it just things that come out like God is like, here, I want you to focus on this. And they're like, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And so when I closed the bookstore, I was like, I still want to do this. But what happened was like I rededicated my life to God. So like I just was like, I want everything that I do to be for his glory. And so like my blog name changed. It used to be Bougie Black Blogger. It was still all positive, but I was like, you know what? I really want God to shine. And so now it's called She Sits at His Feet because when I closed the store, um, I literally have sat at his feet. Like it's a year now, right? And so God blessed me to be able to sit for hours just in his presence, uninterrupted. And and I just love it. So like I was down to like $52 in my bank account. And I was like, God, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to just sit here and study your word. And I want to be with you. I don't want, and he blessed me with a job to sit at home, no, and be able to do that. And so then I was just like, so then I found your class, and I was like, I really want to do the arts ministry, and I didn't know there was like an arts ministry, and I don't know how I found you, but I did, and I was like, I gotta take this class. And then as soon as I took that class, I was like, okay, this is it. And so then I started doing these workshops at coffee stores or coffee shops. And it was just beautiful. So I personally know that people learn by hearing, reading, or seeing, and then doing. And I'm like, you have to mix it all to make meaning of it. And so the writing it's amazing because people struggle with, speaking or just getting those thoughts out. And so when I was teaching high school, like the students that I work with were like from underrepresented areas. And I taught English and most of them were Spanish speaking in ESL. So it was like, okay, but I'm like, y'all need to write. And so I was just thinking about this the other day because I'm just like, I would have them do like a free write for 15 minutes and it just flooded. Like things just came out and I was just like, it was just, I don't know, it was just awesome. And I'm like, oh, these beautiful children have these words, but they just are struggling to get it out and onto paper or just speaking it. But then you do have those that still struggle. And I'm like, there's other ways to demonstrate like your feelings and process it. And so I do a lot of collage. And then with the Bible journaling, like just using it, like, the devotionals or the scriptures and just kind of like coming up with prompts to think about and how to apply it with their lives. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's just, yeah. So we do a lot.
That's beautiful. I love that. So I know that with all these different things that you have had your hands in, that you continue to have your hands in, there have been some bumps along the way too. And there have been some things that have been hard, things that have you've come up against. What have some of those obstacles been? And how do you have I want to say courage, but I feel like there's other words too that keep you pressing on and basically not giving up? What keeps you from not giving up? And I know the bookstore closed, but there was something else. And then there's always something. It's like there's just one thing after another, and God keeps showing you, okay, this is what's next. So how do you keep from not getting discouraged when one season closes and another one is happening?
Right. And so I had to go through the discouragement. I had to go through, the PTSD of, opening a store and closing it. And so it took me a minute because I don't know, for some reason that bookstore just the closing of the bookstore kind of really hurt. And I was just like, I worked really hard on this. And I invested all my money in there and I don't have any of that. And so it's like, okay, how are we going to keep going? And so I was literally just studying about, I can't remember what scripture it is, but it was like, God gives you the desires of your heart. And I was just like, And I was like, he's not saying he's going to give you whatever you want. He's going to plant certain desires in you. And then that's when you are going to go for it. And so then it's like, okay, I have the strong, like this desire. I'm like, it's not that I was just like, oh, that would be cool to do. No, like the desire to share it and teach and, do creative activities with people for healing, and just to empower and equip them. That desire is there. And so like God keeps that in me. And that's what, cause like there's some things that I would start, but I never really had the heart to do it. And like it wasn't really deeply rooted. And I was like, okay, well then that's not a God thing. And so, and it's cool because, everything what I'm doing now is just aligning to his word and just what he wants. And I'm just like, on it, God, do it. Tell me what you want me to do. I will go. And so he's just been placing me and putting things into not perspective, putting things into place. And so I just have to keep going and I have to do things scared.
I want to go back for just a second because you touched on something that I don't want people to miss, which is that you had to go through a little bit of grief after that, the PTSD. I mean, I know it's true. That happens when it feels like this is a dream that you had and it didn't go exactly like you thought. And I think there's so many of us that have had specifically the experience of this isn't what I thought it was going to be at this point. And I had something else in my mind. So if you could think for a second, just going back to those spaces, because I think so many people can relate to that. And specifically in art ministry, we can hear all these stories of people doing cool things. And it's exciting to hear I'm stepping out in faith and I'm doing, but it's those moments, like you said, where you're on the floor and you're bawling your eyes out and you're going, this is not what I thought it was going to be. First of all, I appreciate you sharing that because I think that's very real and it's that's a space everybody can kind of relate to. And it looks different for everybody, but like, this is not what I thought. So in those, this is not what I expected or thought moments. How would you encourage somebody if you were to speak right now into their life? How would you encourage them?
Okay. I would tell them to go through those feelings, do not deny anything. And, just because this chapter ended doesn't mean that this wasn't a setup for something greater. So I personally think God has put things into place, like I said earlier. And so this bookstore was just kind of like a stepping stone for what's to come. So maybe it was just like a snapshot of what's to come and for me to learn some things because I definitely had to learn a lot with this bookstore. Um, and then just trusting God. It's not the end. There's other opportunities, and God will, make a way. Like I'm like, I'm like, although I don't have that money anymore, God will make a way for, the desire that he put inside of me to come to fruition in a way that he wants it, right? But yeah.
And there's not a lack in the kingdom. There's a
Right.
lack. There is a lack, but there's not a lack in the kingdom. It just needs to be redistributed
Right.
into the places where God's like, I know this is what I want to see happen. And so we're going to keep praying for the things that the desires that God has put in you, that they will be able to happen. So what do you tell us some of the things? I know you already have so many different ideas. Tell us some of the things that you would love to see happen, maybe that aren't even happening yet. And yeah, just share with you've been sharing your heart, but share your heart a little bit about this. What's a vision that you see happening that isn't yet?
I want people to share their voices. So, like, I literally just started a publication. So, before it was the zine, right? It was, for the world. And now it is turned into a Christian women's publication where, I have people submit their artwork, devotionals, their stories, testimonies, whatever they want to share based off of a theme. And I would love to get more voices in there, because it's hard. Like a lot of places are just like, if you want to submit an article, you get rejected a lot, and it's just like, the only reason if you would get rejected if it does not go along with the theme or if it's against, what we believe in. But like sharing your testimony shouldn't be, concealed. So I see this publication like just growing and allowing women's voices to be heard, their artwork. I also see myself doing a lot of workshops, like creative workshops, having a space, traveling. So I am actually teaching an art class, and I didn't go to school for art. Like it's not so much as like art, it's like creativity and process. And, yeah, so so me and my boo, we want to have this like art bus where we travel and share, artists and do workshops and stuff like that. And so that's one of our dreams.
How can we do a better job of one, either communicating, but getting or we can maybe even flip this the other way. How do you feel like churches could broaden their perspective in inviting people, creative people in?
That's awesome because I was just thinking about a way that churches can really build community. And so I really would encourage like churches to, bring in active activities where we're not just sitting there. And so what they do, so their creative arts ministry is just mostly, singing or dancing. And so I'm just like, there's more. And I can't dance. Sometimes I can sing, but I'm like, what other ways can we express our love for God and his love for us in a way that's creative? And so
we need more arts and we can help you, right? Okay. So I just wanted to give you a last chance to just share anything that you feel like would encourage an art minister, because we have a lot of people that are either currently in art ministry, that are at the very beginning of stages, people that might not have any idea what art ministry is. And like you said you were Googling things and were like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. There are some people that, have been doing this for years. So how would you encourage somebody right now that is wanting to do art ministry or is doing art ministry, and they either feel stuck or they're just like, I just need the courage to keep going?
yeah, so I would start off with a few people, like do a test activity with people, your community that supports you. And then one thing for me, like I will put on these workshops and either no one shows up or one person shows up. But whenever that happens, I go hard. Like it's not, watered down. Like I'm like, okay, this is a one-on-one session. And, it's that one sheet. Like don't feel like you cannot minister to one person. right? And that activity is gonna still blow their mind because, yo, it's keep going, don't stop. Be really resourceful, right? So I found a really amazing church that has this awesome books or coffee shop. And so I can host the workshops there for free. So then I don't have to charge an arm and a leg. I just charge for supplies. And so we sit there. And then there was this other coffee shop. They were like, yeah, you can do it here for free. And I'm just like, so if you want, if this is the desire that is put into your heart, God's going to make a way for you to find, it to be affordable. The right people will come. And if you don't show up for what God is calling you to do, you're going to mess up other people's lives. Like, you're supposed to be a blessing to these people. So don't feel like can't do it just because it's one or no one shows up. Just keep on showing up. One more thing, do what you love. So like, you don't have to do everything under the creative arts. So like, my thing is a lot of collaging and writing. And so I haven't done any like canvas painting, even though I want to. But there are things that you can really, hone in on, and that can be your niche, right? Because I feel like if you do too much, like you spread yourself thin. And so just, think of it like, go small first. Like, what's the scripture? Don't despise the small things, So just take it and just keep going. It will grow. It will transform. It'll be beautiful.
Amen. I could not have said it better myself. I just want to give you a moment to plug anything you want to plug. If there's, your blog or any books or anything, or even just if somebody wanted to reach out to you. And you know what, you have a vision of going and sharing and speaking and getting people involved. And so how might one get in touch with you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram at in two places, _ she sits at his feet _ or Cicely Renee blog. So that's the main things for Instagram. And then the website is shesitsathisfeet.com. But it will say Bougie Black Blogger because I didn't want a brand new website, but you put that in and it will go back to that. And I am looking for voices and artists to contribute. So like, I'll show you a little bit. So this is the first publication that we did. And so in there, I had 8 women, including myself, to, share stories. And this was called Journey Well, Thriving Through the Wilderness.
Well, I'm so thankful. I feel like we are all really blessed. I'm always blessed to hear what God is always inspired. Not gonna lie, sometimes intimidated. I'm like, that's so many ideas and it's so incredible, but it really is inspiring. Because I know that each one of those, like you said, it's about listening to the desires that God's putting on our hearts for that time and that season, and then just jumping in and going for it and trusting each step of the way. It is very hard to jump into the deep end, but so many times, I mean, God loves faith. His heart is tender towards faith. And when we step out in faith, and you have stepped out in faith so many times. And so we're thankful for your obedience and your faithfulness, because we, through that, see God's faithfulness to you and to those that he's called you to serve. So thank you, friends. And thank you for blessing us with your time. And we pray abundant blessings over it, not just one thing, but all the many things that your hands are in right now. So that it will not only be funded, but that truly that people's lives would not only be touched, but they would continue to be empowered to share their stories. And it's such a beautiful calling over your life. So thank you.
Ew. It was a blessing to be on here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for another session of Blank Canvases and stories of people being called into art ministry all around the world. Blessings, and we hope you join us again. Don't forget to check out createdministry.com for resources, tips, and ways that you can be trained in art ministry as well.